Welcome to TeamTalk from Team Kinetic, the podcast that takes a deeper dive into volunteer management with me, Chris Martin.
So welcome to TeamTalk from Team Kinetic with me, Chris Martin.
And me, Imo Greatbatch. TeamTalk is the podcast that dives deeper into the world of volunteer management and getting to know the people who help make volunteering happen. Why do they do it? How do they do it? And what do they want to see change? If you're new listening to the podcast, a big welcome. And if you've listened before, welcome back.
So how's your week been, Imo?
Very good, thanks, Chris. A lot of meetings with volunteers, which is always the best part of the role. So really good.
A nice week.
Yeah.
And you enjoying the sunshine?
Yes. I would like to work outside, but the glare on the screen's not helpful. So staying in my little cubbyhole.
I have a little hack for that where you get a little box and you can put it around the screen. But I'll send you the instructions on how to make it.
Okay, I'll look forward to that one for the next call.
This week we're joined by Alaina MacGregor, the Chief Executive of British Blind Sport, and Philippa Bass, who's the Participation Officer at British Blind Sport.
Thanks, Chris. And we thought, Alaina, Philippa, big welcome to Team Talk. Great to have you with us. We always like to share a little bit about our guests, and thought I'd introduce Alaina, who's pursued a career in marketing and then also volunteered in several roles. But in 2010, she volunteered with British Blind Sport and a year later became CEO. So we're really excited to hear about your journey and story into this role and what you've been doing for the past few years. And a bit of detective work shared. Some colleagues described you as being tenacious, strategic, determined, and an inspiration and motivational leader. So it's great to have you on the call. Philippa, you're the Participation Officer at British Blind Sport and coordinating the delivery of key programmes like Have a Go and Active at Home, as well as supporting NGBs which are national governing bodies, with their existing and new provisions. You joined the team in September 21, and that was further to moving from your extensive career in disability football, even though you remained an active and passionate volunteer in football. So a big welcome to you.
Thank you.
And Philippa, have you been keeping up with the football? Have you been watching the Euros?
No, do you know, I haven't actually. But in June, it was the blind Euros and I was out actually in Italy. So you can't forgive me for just kind of like not watching the women's ones. I was away watching the disability ones. So
I guess we'll start right at the beginning. Best place to start. Alaina, tell us a little bit about how you ended up from a volunteer to CEO. Tell us a little bit about that journey, because it sounds really interesting.
Oh, thanks. It was a path that I didn't sort of like determine. It sort of just happened around me. So I had been working in charity work. I'd done, like Imogen said, I'd worked in marketing, and I felt it was really exciting and I really liked it, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled. So I then went into charity work and worked in a local charity where I live in Warwickshire. And it did very well. I did that for about 7 years. It was recognised as the best version of its type in the UK at that time. So that was good. And I had a lot of volunteering opportunities there, very much on the ground, very much local led as well. So it's very slightly different to what we do, which is much more about a national picture. I then went and worked at County Record Office in Warwickshire because I actually like history and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. So I just needed some time to reflect and worked on a project that had a definitive end. So I thought, right, that'll focus me over the 2 years about what I want to do. It was part-time, and simply I just thought, oh, well, I'm missing my charity work. Where's the nearest charity to my house? Oh, it was British Blind Sport. I'll go in and do some volunteering. Really, just to help them with fundraising initially. I'd been helping, and at that time we had about 3 months running costs in the bank. That's all, and a small turnover of about £60,000 a year. So you can imagine, with only 3 months running costs was very low. And one member of staff who was an admin officer. And I volunteered sort of towards the end of 2010, early 2011. And then the 3 trustees at the time suggested that, would you like to be CEO? And I said, well, A, you can't afford a CEO. And it wasn't because I was expecting loads of money. And B, you need to go through a proper process because I don't ever want to be accused of, swiping it. So we did advertise, and it was very much a very part-time role. So for almost a year, I did both jobs. which was quite hard, doing my job at the County Record Office. Won an award for volunteering, actually, National Award, which was quite timely. And then 2012 was looming, and I thought, I'm going to have to bite the bullet here, because someone needs to make sure that blind and partially sighted sport is really being taken seriously. And hence that I kind of jumped in with both feet and both eyes closed. So 12 years later. So, but I love it. And somebody asked me recently, would I ever move on? And, we all move on at some point. We all go on sell-by date. But in reality, I feel like there's so much more we can still do. And I know what I have learned is that I love working in sport. I love the people. I love the mindset. A lot of people who work in sport are either ex-athletes or athletes part-time, and very focused, very driven people.
It's a great story. It really is. I think maybe more NGPs would be better served by that approach to recruitment than
legacy from the Olympic Games and sort of Paralympics, and preparing for that, and how blind and partially sighted sports kind of represented. What's the landscape now in that arena, and how many volunteers support your kind of organisation along with your staffing structure?
We've really shifted from 2012. So, and when I say we, I often talk about the NDSOs as a family. So the other NDSOs, it's National Disability Sports Organisations, the likes of Wheel Power, UK Deaf Sport, Dwarf Sport UK, Cerebral Palsy Sport, and Limb Power. I hope I've not missed any of you guys out. Where we were going to, if you think 2011, Paralympics really didn't have the spotlight that disability sport now has, but the Paralympics enabled that. And I remember I was at a meeting pre the Games, and Tim Reddish was the chair at the time of the BPA, the British Paralympic Association, and he said, we're going to sprinkle magic and we're going to make this happen. And I remember sort of the hair standing up on my back of my neck and thinking, oh, we are, and we did. And it really did put disability sport on the map. It has gone through peaks and troughs over the years. There was this time when straight after the Games there was a lot of interest, but was it getting enough funding? Then other things come in the way, and then there's an argument that we're still not putting enough money into disability sport. Then we've kind of lived through a pandemic where people who are disabled have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. But that shift of focus and that need to support people who are disabled or in minority groups, I think has changed dramatically just in the last couple of years as a post-pandemic legacy, really, as to these people are a huge part of our society and need our assistance. And the likes of Sport England, with their new Uniting the Movement, have really sort of committed to supporting British blind sport and the other NDSOs over the next 5-year period. And that's a testament to say, yes, we understand the importance of disability sport and where it needs to sit. So we're very grateful. So in answer to your question, and that was very long-winded, Imogen, I'm sorry, it's an exciting time for disability sport, but we need to get it absolutely right. What we can't do is use it as a test bed for change. People are feeling isolated now. People are feeling marginalised now. So let's make sure that we work within this new ecosystem, as Sport England like to refer to it, with all of us working as part of a big system to make really positive change.
I think it's particularly interesting when you have someone like yourself who's sort of a driven CEO, that you're always looking forwards to what's going next, how you're going to improve it. And it's sometimes you forget to take a snapshot of where you were in 2011 and how far you've come as an organisation, and as disability sport has come as a movement. I know from being in a previous life I was an SEN teacher, and the world has changed considerably from where it was when I was teaching back in 2007, 2008. Like you said, there's still a lot to do, but where you've come from is, in that period of time, has been quite fantastic.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think I use a lot of analogies for the way I work as a CEO, and I often say we really have a big windscreen because that's why we're moving forward, but you've got the rearview mirror and you do need to look back, because if you don't look back from time to time, you do forget where you've come from and what you've learned from what's behind you. So it's absolutely imperative that we're always moving forward, but if you forget what you've done, or you become complacent about where you are, you're not really learning. And as an organisation, I think we are on a journey, and always have been on a journey of continuous improvement. We're just going through a strategic review, actually, and we were asked where we'd like to be in. I did a piece of work with the trustees, and the piece of work was again done yesterday with some of the staff, and we're talking to stakeholders. But the trustees meeting was, where would you like to be in 5 years' time, and where would you like to be in 15 years' time? And I said in 15 years' time, we shouldn't be here at all. That's true success. Because actually, if you integrate sport properly and it's on the radar of anyone who's offering or promoting sport, or making, even as people who, providing for spectators, then actually there shouldn't be a need for a British blind sport. Unfortunately, there currently is. But true success would be to walk away and think, yeah, I've done my job.
And that's the historian in you as well, Alaina. I feel like that rearview mirror. Heritage is hugely important in kind of paving the way for how we move our sports forward. Philippa, bringing you in, you have a critical role in kind of some of the participation initiatives to actually do the things that Alaina's talking about. Talk us through some of the things that you kind of directly impact participants and engage them with, as well as some of the things that you do to support possibly sports to be more inclusive and open, adapted, to make sure that they can tackle the inequalities that Alaina talked about.
Yeah, so some of the programmes that I work with, and there's many of the staff as well at British Blind Sport that all play a helping hand and a massive part to everything we do. We have kind of some events management programme, like our Have a Go days, as you mentioned earlier, and they're kind of like a really key part of our delivery to link. So I class this as like a pathway finder. So we're not the middleman, but we are the middleman to try and help people find where they can sit and fit within sport. And sometimes they just don't know, or they've had a bad experience, and we're trying to find them where they can fit now. And that, like you said, sports adapted so much over these years, and it might be they had a go 10 years ago, but now there's so much more. And there's so, the NGBs are a lot better in what they do. So it's finding where they can sit and fit. And I Have a Go is a really key part of our delivery, where people can come and just have a go in a safe and secure environment in all different sports, ones they might have tried before, but ones that are nice and fresh and new to them, and to link them up with the local community. So it's really key for us. And we rely heavily on volunteers to do that, volunteers in those clubs that are coming to deliver, but also volunteers to make sure our day run's really, really good as well.
Our Find a Guide, which is a programme that we do along with England Athletics, and we instigated that, and somebody came to me and asked for it was a young girl, actually, she was about 16, and in Wales, and I'm going back probably about 8 years now, time flies really quick, and she wanted somebody to go running with her. And initially, because we are an advocacy, we are that conduit that Philippa's just referred to, that kind of linking people, we were like, oh yeah, we'll find you someone. And then I had to stop and think, what am I doing? This girl is already vulnerable because of her age. She's vulnerable because she's got sight loss. And I'm finding some stranger to start running with her. What on earth? So we kind of took a step back and worked with England Athletics on, what makes a good guide runner? What is, what would happen if we had a guide running workshops and actually provided a license to become a guide runner, and actually these people need to be DBS checked. And that's now, fast forward where we are now, and I think we've got about 1,700 guide runners on our database. So if you are blind or partially sighted and want somebody to run with you, you can go onto the Find a Guide and you put in your postcode, but you also put in what style of running, if you're a sprinter, if you're a marathon runner, and it will help you find your nearest volunteer. I have to say, we wouldn't have been able to do that without England Athletics and the time and money that they've invested in it, because they actually host all the workshops and they host the database now. But it's, if we're going to have pride in anything, it's just like the level of support we put into those volunteers to keep themselves safe as well as other individuals. Because volunteering, in fact, somebody texted me earlier today to say, are you free on Saturday? I'm running, she's doing something, a friend of mine, for a brain tumour charity, and just wants me to collect the money on inflatable bounce balls or something. I've said yes if I'm free. But you're putting yourself out there, whether it's handling money or handling people. Yeah, that's what we've got to bear in mind. They're doing it for free, giving up their valuable time. Everyone's time is valuable. And yet we potentially are leaving people wide open. We are very aware from our volunteers' point of view of just how grateful we are, but also how important they are for us to thrive as a business.
This is the kind of thing that volunteer managers are facing, and these are the kind of battles they are having. As an organisation, understanding the value of your volunteers, and as you've rightly been able to demonstrate to England Athletics, the value of the volunteer is very high. If you can, but you do have to protect them, you do have to look after them, you have to treat them as an asset in a way that is conducive to the volunteer, but also to the benefit of the organisation. And that's a tricky balancing act sometimes to get that right. So it kind of brings on to some of the more volunteer managery questions. As an organisation, what because you are an advocacy organisation, and I know you do stuff of your own, but you also work a lot with other organisations. Tell us a little bit about sort of the type of volunteering that British Blind Sport offers directly itself, the kind of roles that you look to recruit for, and how you manage that process.
I'm going to pass you over to Philippa, because Philippa actually does the Have a Go days, and we do have some volunteers who've been with us for a very long time in the office offering admin support. In fact, one lady came in, she won't mind me saying her first name, Anne, really inspired by the 2012 Paralympics, and said, what can I do to help, and is still with us, which is amazing. So she's lovely. So we do have some admin support officers, but in general, the majority of our volunteers are either in our sports sections, which Philippa supports, or actually in our delivery programme. So Philippa can probably best answer you the type of roles that we offer.
So for the deliveries, like what I said, for the Have a Go days, we do the core delivery programme. So it's those Have a Go days, and they're all dotted around England and home nation. So we like to be fair and equal in everywhere we deliver. And our key area is to kind of engage people within the community that want to help at our events. So they're one-off days, but then also how can we then get them into the clubs that they're working with on those days too. We basically just have an open programme where we put things out to basically community groups, volunteering arms, even on Facebook groups. I've kind of put some information and just kind of see who wants to come back, because sometimes it's a key area where they've seen something on the TV and they want to get involved, or they have a friend that might be partially sighted or blind, they want to get involved and just give back to the community. So we kind of engage them to come to our events and upskill them, so learning about the sports that are there. And then the idea is to link them out to local things that they can carry on their journey with, like the people doing the sports as well. So it's really key for us. We have the different events like the Have a Go days, we have the swim gala, so there's different sports that people can get involved in. And then, like Alaina's just said, we have our sports sections. So at BBS we have 3 different sports that we kind of oversee and look after, and they're 10-pin bowling, archery and shooting. Volunteers are really key for all those different parts of those sports, because the adaptations to sport is a lot of VI need a sighted kind of guide. So they always need, if you want to go shooting, you need a sighted guide that can go with you to shooting. One thing might be just to get you to the session, but also lining you up to kind of say this is where the target is. Acoustic shooting's different because it's on sounds, but it's still about getting them ready and set for participating themselves. And archery actually is, they talk to that person and move them where they need to be shooting. So it's very much a hands-on volunteering. So volunteers are the backbone of everything we do. You couldn't have the sports without those volunteers. And it's really key for us to work with those NGBs to kind of go make those volunteers really comfortable. And particularly with visual impairments, it's about asking those questions which you don't think are appropriate, but you need to know. And really, that's a big bit for us to work with those NGBs to kind of say, it's the information, because those people are people, and you're helping people, but it's just ask those silly questions to get you over that barrier to kind of say, yeah, it's completely fine. You can do anything you want to do.
And it's fascinating there, because you think about, Alaina, you talked about the kind of human side of volunteering and the social connection, which Philippa, you talked about. But I don't know whether you know, but the communication challenges we face and how we all describe things, to think about how you support someone aligning a target for a sport like shooting, the communication skills between the two and the connection that you've got to have must be really, really strong. How do you build that into supporting, nurturing, identifying those relationships between a volunteer and a kind of participant?
Yeah, so within our sports sections, Philippa's absolutely right. We've got, the sighted guides. The sports sections are run by volunteers as well, and that's really key. They do all their finance, they do all their own promotion, etc. I mean, obviously we support that. That's our role, and it's our role to govern any finance because it's charity money, etc. But volunteers are managing volunteers within our sports sections. And they really do identify their sighted supports through their friendship circles, through their families, through, sometimes we've advertised on their behalf, but then we've provided support to them. But that communication is absolutely key. Communication is really key anyway for anybody living with sight loss. You and I might read something in a newspaper, they need to have a screen reader, for instance. So there's an additional level of communication, both out to the participant who is blind or partially sighted and the volunteer who sometimes is blind and partially sighted, because quite frankly, we are all about getting people from our community into being able to be volunteers as well. And it is very, very much about relationship building and trust. You know, when people go and help Philippa at a Have a Go Day or the swimming gala, we're trusting them. They're trusting that we're going to look after them and make sure that they're within the boundaries of safeguarding rules, etc. I mean, for instance, an example is at the swimming gala, and Philippa will know far better than me, but we never leave a volunteer. We would never give somebody a volunteering role of taking a young person into the showers after they've been in the races, because that would just leave them wide open. It would leave the young person more at risk. So that trust is, give me a role, but make sure it's within the boundaries of what keeps me safe as well. And that's where the communication is. It's based on a foundation of trust.
I just want to pick up on a little point you made there about the participant and the volunteer. And I just wondered if there is a natural pathway within blind sport for young people who start off as participants coming back as volunteers, because of that nature of the community, the sort of shared endeavour of it all, and the niche nature of some of the sports, I should imagine, as well. Does that seem to be a natural pathway for your participants? Do they tend to come back as helpers and as volunteers?
We've definitely had that, yeah. We've had some people who've come and been participants who've then gone on to work for British Blind Sport, both unpaid work and paid work. Mm-hmm. And that's been, we're in that position now, actually. We've got somebody who used to volunteer at BBS who's not long joined us as a paid member of staff. And, you know, for us, it's about having that communication, going back to what Imogen just said as well, for life, if we can. You know, people have different sporting journeys, and whether it's a volunteering or participant, you know, let's just take a woman, you know, when you might be interested in sport when you're younger, this is whether you're sighted or not, and then suddenly you become very body aware in your teens, and then you don't want to play it so much, and then you go to university and you might join the netball team and think, oh, I should quite like this, so you're playing it again for a bit, then you go off and have a career, and you might be participating in it or not, and then you might have a child, and that child then physically, there'll be times when you can't actually be playing sport, depending on what your sport is, of course. I mean, you can swim up to the last minute, but you probably can't horse ride a box. So, you know, but then on top of that, it's, you know, basically our parameters change, our responsibilities change, and then you've also got injury. You know, people can have an injury. So let's say it's a man who might have been playing sport all his life, have an injury, have an undiagnosed condition, and suddenly they feel that they can't participate. And that happens to us a lot. And Philippa probably has seen that more than me. You know, I met a man recently, an awards event, and he's not long lost his he lost his sight about 18 months ago. And he used to play football, and he doesn't think he can. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't? Of course you can. And he just didn't think it was for him anymore. So, you know, we've then, in fact, I think it was Philippa or Alex, it might have been Alex who I spoke to, one of my other team members, and said, look, we need to get this guy signposted to his nearest blind or partially sighted team as soon as possible to see that there's opportunities. And we know that team will be run by volunteers, because that's the way it is. The sector is, I think I read somewhere the other day that volunteering, and you guys may know better than me, but sport takes up something like 80% of volunteering roles in the UK. So there are 30% of people doing volunteering elsewhere. So no, 20%, sorry, do my maths. But yeah, but actually sport takes up, and if you think about it, dads at the weekend, mums at the weekend, you can see why that happens.
It's huge. It is huge, Alaina, but there are some concerning stats that Sport England have put out around the kind of decline from 9 million to 6 million sort of volunteers that are actually supporting sport. So I guess, are you aware of, well, I guess sort of at a senior level, CEO level, do you feel there's consistent value at that level for volunteering and the impact of volunteers? Or do you think there's more work to be done in that area?
I think that's a really good question. I think there has been, in my experience, always been consistent positive impact by working with volunteers. and I would hate to see a decline. I can understand various external reasons why there has been a decline, the pandemic being one of them, the current crisis, financial being another, for example. But as a CEO, I would feel very disappointed if we weren't looking at how we can not only encourage volunteers of the future, but also maintain the ones that we've got. And some people come and go because they have their life experiences as well. So it's not just about the sport, it's around it, but it's about helping people be on that journey and keep in contact with them. It's hearing that's so many less is disconcerting for the sector. I wonder if other sectors have gone through, those who do use volunteers, and what their results would be. Is it almost like a national pandemic around volunteering? Or is it just sport? I suspect it would be a national picture because we've all been massively affected, whatever role you're in.
Yeah, the national picture is not quite as bleak as sport, unfortunately. I think sport as well has gone through some structural changes in the sort of the size of clubs and the formality of volunteering, where it was probably more informal with the smaller clubs as we move towards these bigger and bigger club institutions. Changes that people that consider themselves to be volunteers now that maybe did 5 or 6 years ago, when it was a slightly more informal maybe arrangement, that people would probably suggest that they were volunteering involved. So I think there's a few factors at work. I also think as well there's an ongoing swing towards more younger people volunteering, which is great, but the nature of the volunteering younger people do tends to be transient and shorter, and we are losing some of that more established long-term, the traditional club person that's been there at the club for 20, 30 years. We're not seeing as many of them maybe. There's some fundamental sort of shifts socially and societally that sort of explains this stuff. But you're right, as anybody that's got a passion for sport, it's a worry when you see them kind of numbers. It does make you wonder what long-term impact that might have on the viability of some of these clubs and some of these organisations. Which is not ideal. I want to pick up on something you said earlier as well about governing body, your national approach versus the locality based stuff you did when you worked for a charity, because I think this is one of the really interesting things, and hopefully something that you may be able to share some thoughts on this. NGBs have this amazing remit for a national approach or something, but volunteering is something that is such a locality led and based thing. How as an organisation can you sort of put out a national message but encourage that local impact? What can you share with us about that?
Well, I will let Philippa answer some of this as well, because Philippa has worked for the biggest NGB, and then there is that very much that local impact. From my point of view, the charity that I worked for before, because it was local, it was within a community, you get to know people and you get to know those individuals and who wants to volunteer and also what motivates them to do their bit for their society. So then you can almost find, when your volunteering role comes up, you think, oh, I know Lillian could do that, or Joe could do that, or whatever. When you're looking at a national picture, you might have a much broader message, but then you don't have that relationship with that individual. So you have to try and build that relationship in a different way. So for instance, the Find a Guide database, one of my concerns is they go through a guide running course, which they pay for, and then they get a DBS check. And then if we can't find somebody to run with them, are we going to lose that person? Because it's a chicken and egg. If we advertised for the blind and partially sighted people first who want guide runners, then we then have to go and find them. So the decision was actually, let's train people up and then find people who want to run with them. So there's discussions internally now, does that get wider? Does that become a volunteer who can, guide caddy or guide cycle with, or etc.? So somebody who's put themselves out as a volunteer feels valued. I think on that local level, you can do that much better. You have to, not much better, you have to do it in a different way. So that's just been my experience. I think because Philippa's worked in football, which, does have a national approach, but is very reliant on volunteers for, the weekend matches. You might have some additional thoughts on that.
I would say exactly what you've kind of gone on with. It is a personalised approach. So when I was working in football, who are the biggest audience to be your volunteers, and it's parents, because the parents want to see their children participate. And that's how you kind of you need to do it. You need to do it on an individual locality kind of based approach, because you need those people to see it in action. So when you do it from wider, you just say, do you want to volunteer? Go to your local place. You just signpost them to a local place to then kind of do it on a personalised approach. So it was really, for us, if we wanted to see something succeed at a local level, it was to engage the people that it's got direct implications for. So it's those parents kind of say, you want to see your children enjoy their sport. You are the reason why that can kind of happen, really. So upskill you and play a part and kind of give them the kudos. It's because of you. And I think that's really a part of volunteering, is we need to kind of give it back and say that you've done this. And they can see it succeed, and it's the smile on their faces, and then they give their time up. And I think that's the pandemic has kind of changed different things, where those families, instead of, like, you see parents going, I'll go through all my age group and my son might drop out or my daughter might drop out because they're doing their GCSEs, but they stay because they've kind of got an in, haven't they, already? But the pandemic has kind of said, I want to change that sort of thing. I want to spend time with my family. So we really need to go back to that basics and kind of get those parents and get those brothers and sisters and family members to kind of say, you are the reason why your sibling or your friend is participating in that sport. And it's that, to me, you've got to create that little family friend network.
I think Philippa's got a really good point there, because I've got friends personally who've helped with football for quite some time locally, and although their son was now gone on to get married, and he's quite a lot older, they're still they were still heavily involved because they'd made friends, and they start seeing kids come through the ranks, and then that pandemic has almost broken that cycle for them. So the last conversation I had with them, they were like, we're not sure if we're going to go back to football now, purely because the kids that they were working with at, say, 14 or 15 have now moved into another group, and because of their age, and they'd have to be starting all over again, and their initial impetus to go was their own son. So I think you've got a really valid point there, Philippa, about how the pandemic has had that impact on that continuity of volunteering.
Yeah, I think I had a really interesting conversation with another volunteer manager from one of the big charities, and they said the worst thing ever is when you break a volunteer's routine, because then they get a sense of getting the time back and they quite like it. It's quite nice if they keep doing it because they don't know any different. It's only when they get a bit of free time back that they sometimes appreciate having a bit of time off.
Yeah, I would say I'd be in that category as well, because I did a lot of volunteering. Even though I worked in football, I am still the secretary for a big pan disability league in Leicester.
Yeah.
And I would give up probably a couple of weekends every month to deliver this football. And it wasn't any connection to me. It was just, I used to enjoy seeing them all play. Yeah. And the pandemic changed me, because I was like, I used to give up so much of my time, and I used to work in football as well. I don't want to put myself as all my weekends are not for me anymore, and it kind of changed the way I think. And so I still want to give something back, but I realised I'm only going to do one weekend out of the 4. Yeah. That's what so I'm reducing my own kind of time to give back to the community.
I was going to say, I think that's really important to link back to some of the things you said that you're doing really well around your kind of what's termed, I think, in volunteering is episodic. So those kind of like one-off opportunities, the project-based type kind of volunteering, and how as we move forward, do we kind of bring people back to just give a little bit, that is a little bit makes a big difference. And how can we adapt as a sector the opportunities to hook people back in and feel that kind of, Alaina, as you said, that magic that you get from supporting participants. And we know certainly kind of in netball, a lot of the research and insight we have around volunteers is when they kind of do it for that sense of achievement and seeing others succeed, and how they see the smiles of the participants, and that is like really rewarding. So how do we bring some more of those stories to life? I was also quite keen to see that, as well as those kind of human skills that you look for in volunteers, there's some real skill sets around optometrists and ophthalmologists to do the kind of sight classification. How do you kind of go about recruitment and engagement where you've got really specific skill set? And do you have quite a good network of people that support you as volunteers kind of from that professional sense?
So we have to follow a certain rule. So we can't just have anybody in that kind of line of work. So we work closely with the Royal College of Ophthalmology and places like Moorfields Hospital, which is an eye hospital, to identify volunteers. They then have to, even if they are fully qualified ophthalmologists, they have to go past our senior classifier to have conversations with her about their background. Because I've learned, although I'm not medical in any way, there's different kinds of ophthalmologists. Somebody might be a specialist in lens, somebody else might be a specialist in the cornea, somebody else might be a specialist in the optic nerve. And, you know, Claire will then work with me and Sarah, who's our other person who works at BBS for classification, to identify the needs within our classification pool. We are going through a bit of a recruitment stage at the moment, actually, because one of our long-term classifiers is just about retiring. It's harder in a way, but then if you get in the right, you know, eye health magazine and stuff, sometimes it goes the other way and you're quite inundated. And then it's, oh my gosh, you know, we've now got too many and who do we let down? Because that's something else you have to do with volunteers sometimes. So yeah, we do that, but it can be hard. It can be tricky to keep everyone happy.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. And maybe we should have a chat offline about some corporate partnerships we might be able to introduce you to that might be quite interesting on that one. Conversation for another day. The other thing I was going to say, when you just sort of harking back a little bit to when you're talking about as a NGB, what you do, what I sort of took from what you said is you've got to create that culture of within the NGB that volunteering is valued, but it's about what you do locally. And then when you do something as the governing body, that you set the standard of how it should be done right. So you have those sort of two things going on that, yes, this is important, this is what we think is important. And then the second thing is this, and then when you do volunteering, this is how it should look, and this is how the volunteer should be treated. And this is, you know, you set the standard, and then everybody else can follow what you do. Creating that culture, it seems like you guys are right on the money with that. I wanted to sort of talk about the See My Voice project, because I know it's something that's you've had quite a lot of good publicity about quite recently, and so it might be useful if you could sort of tell the listeners a little bit about the project and what you've sort of British Blind Sport have learned from being involved in it.
I feel like I'm doing a lot of the talking here, and I will pass on to Philippa, because Philippa also not only works with our See My Voice team, but she also oversees and supports our youth advisory panel that's come out of SMV. So I'll pass on to Philippa about that. See My Voice came about, and there's a little bit of a story behind it. About 6 or 7 years ago now, I'm terrible for remembering numbers and dates. I met a young person who had lost his sight and was losing his sight, and he was at our swimming gala. And he was participating, and I said to him, what's the hardest thing about losing your vision? And he said, it's because people don't hear me anymore, they don't see me. Just because I can't see doesn't mean I can't have a voice. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the teachers talk to my mum and dad and they talk over me, and that's the same when I go for a medical appointment. A very articulate young boy, he was about 13 then. And I drove away from a very successful swimming gala feeling really frustrated, because although we had a really great event, I thought our young people aren't being heard. And that's when See My Voice came about. That's where the name was. And it isn't about, people often say, you know, see, it's obviously to do with seeing. Yes, we are a sight loss charity, but it's actually about see that I'm here and hear me. And that's quite important. So SMV, as we call it, is about enabling young people who are blind and partially sighted to develop leadership skills and influencing skills, and using sport as the platform to do that in. And part of that is that we help them identify a local club or organisation where they can do some volunteering. And it's really to grow their confidence and to work alongside a bespoke qualification that they get, which is accredited by Sports Leaders UK around leadership and coaching. It's interesting you said, what have we learned from it? What I've learned from it very early on, and I've always said that everybody's got a value in society, is that the host organisations that have had our volunteers have really benefited massively from it, because they've suddenly realised that this young person who they perhaps didn't see as somebody as value is now assisting them, not only volunteering, but in many cases helping them rethink about how they advertise for volunteers, because previously they hadn't thought about having disabled volunteers, rethinking their policies, rethinking about how they work as an organisation to be more inclusive. The best example, and there's more than one, but the best example was in the first cohort of young people. We had a young girl who wanted to work in cricket, and we've always been keen that the young people actually work in the sport that they want to work in as well. It shouldn't be here dictating. She just happens to live not very far from Lords, so we approached Lords cricket ground and said, you know, can we get a young volunteer to come and work with you? And
that's not a bad opportunity.
Yeah. And they start from the top. And their response was, we don't have volunteers under 18, and we've definitely never had anyone who's blind before, and because she was fully blind, I believe. My response was, well, that's not a good enough excuse. So we sent down our young leaders officer at the time, and she worked with their staff on how to support this young girl to working there. As a response to that, I'm now working with ECB in a different area about how to change all their policies around their clubs and how to make all of their clubs inclusive, because it's been such a rewarding experience for the staff at Lords and for ECB as an organisation. And I have to say, ECB have been brilliant. They've been very forward thinking in, okay, how do we expand this? In terms of that value, that is a huge value to show people that people with, regardless of their disability, have purpose for being at their venue and a value to that. Out of SMV, some of the kids that then go through it get the opportunity to go on our youth advisory panel, and that's really to help influence in other areas. So I'll pass on to Philippa, because she now sort of helps run that along with Connor, who's our SMV officer.
So Youth Advisory Panel is made up of 8 young people, and like what Alaina's just said, they're the next natural progression out of See My Voice. And it's really keen for us as a business to listen to the voice of young people. So again, and they're young volunteering people. So they're either volunteering at local clubs, or they're still participating in the sports that they enjoy in as well. So they've got kind of 2 hats on, part of our panel, and we've got kind of 3 key areas that we want to listen to what they want to say and how we can mould it better for young people in the future. So we look at participation, so they look at our events programme and say, what could we do better, what do we like, what do we dislike, how can we get more young people participating? That's one of their key aims as well. Our social media, so it's really key that they're the young people, they don't want us there to kind of tell them this is how you do it now. They know the next new apps that are coming through, so they're going to help us with things like that. And also our membership, so we are a membership organisation, and we want more new young members be part of our crew as well. So they're going to kind of look at what we offer and what they can suggest. So it's really key for us to listen to those young people and young volunteers, because they're the future.
No, that's amazing, Philippa. And how do your young volunteers link with other sports? Do they, because we know that youth is a key area of particularly the Sport England strategy, uniting the movement, and kind of how do you sort of connect in with other sports around that youth element, or do they currently?
Sorry, Philippa, just to add there that some of the young leaders have gone on to be encouraged to volunteer at higher levels. So for one young boy, actually used to help his local swimming club, helping with the timekeeping, various other roles, is a swimmer himself, and is now on the Swim England's youth panel. So there's a connection there. The Activity Alliance is doing a lot of work around youth volunteering in sport and how they can influence, and we are sort of engaging some of our young people into their programmes and early stage conversations about how those programmes can be shaped. Because the other thing is young people are very clear about what they like and don't like. So rather than any of us within the sector sort of enforce stuff on them, it's better to hear them at the beginning and the outset. So there's that piece of work. Philippa, I don't know if you know of any of the other young people perhaps on the panel or been part of our See My Voice who've gone on to do other volunteering roles of influence. Or
there's been quite a few, so it's really important to us. They might have been part of our programme, and they use this as something to add to their CV as well. So we've got to remember that part of it. So it's also that movement on for them. So like what Alaina said, we have a youth advisory panel, but so do a lot of NGBs. And it's really key that they listen to the young people's voice too. So it's nice to see people kind of progress from See My Voice into the youth advisory panel and out again to other NGBs onto their advisory panels too, so we can see what we've done along kind of the pathway that we provided. They're then going to use this to the next stepping stone. So Yusuf, who was one of our members of See My Voice Youth Advisory Panel, is now part of Goalball UK's advisory panel as well. So it's nice to see all those volunteers and young leaders progress up the pathway.
Using those skills,
exactly.
And when advocating for what they know, their lived experience, and sharing it with these organisations that often don't understand the lived experience of people that are visually impaired. They're offering a really important insight. Have you spoke to the guys at Step Up to Serve about this project? Because it feels like something that very much sits within their area of interest as well.
We've spoken to lots of people with different projects, different other youth advisory, just like Philippa just said. But no, I haven't spoken to them. I don't know if Alex has, who's our National Partnerships Manager, but for sure we would like to hear their details.
Yeah, love to. I'll do you an introduction to Stephen, who looks after a big chunk of that programme.
Chris, is it worth just sort of kind of like rounding up on, there's a little event going on end of the month in Birmingham, but I also feel like there's a pretty major event going on a year later that you've been a part of securing, Alaina, which is quite exciting, with the International Blind Sports Federation. How are you involved, or your volunteers involved, in supporting the Commonwealth Games, or possibly the legacy opportunities for the kind of World Games the following year in 2023?
So we've been invited to bring a group of young people to some of the actual Commonwealth Games, just to, not as volunteers, but kind of spectators, but to understand what the Games looks like, a bit more of a sort of behind the scenes tour a little bit. So Connor, who's our See My Voice officer, is liaising with whoever it is at the Commonwealth Games doing that. We are involved within the Commonwealth Games in a different way, because British Blind Sport were the people that submitted the bid and were successful with the bid for the IBSA World Games. So we are intrinsic, well, the Games can't happen without us, quite frankly. So I keep calling the Commonwealth Games a precursor to the real Games, which I'm not going to say, but I do.
The test event.
I'm biased as well.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh, great. So when you find out that, the sinks didn't work in the Athletes Village, you will get them sorted for next year, won't you? But what we have been doing is we've been working with the Commonwealth Games about accessibility to the Games, in all seriousness, because I was on the part of the LOCOG group about accessibility to 2012. So myself and other people within our organisation have met with various people actually at the campus at Birmingham University, because that is where the Athletes Village is going to be, and also with the wider local organising committee. So we're kind of involved in that way. In terms of the volunteering, we've advertised on their behalf about their volunteering opportunities, which was actually some time ago now, because they were looking maybe a year ago for their volunteers and ready for preparation, etc., so that blind and partially sighted people can be represented as well. And then the next step, if you talk to anyone in our Birmingham cohorts and groups at the moment, be it a sport, be it one of our venues, be it any of them, all they go is, can you talk to me at the end of August? So we've kind of deliberately backed off for the next month and a half to give them the chance to show their little event. And then we will sit down with them and talk about how we do volunteering and engaging more people from that, post those people that they've captured who could then support the IBSA World Games. Around that, there's going to be a huge guiding training. And also there's got to be legacy work, because we don't just want it to be a 10-day event and thank you very much and goodbye. How do we capture volunteers and then link them to people like Sport Birmingham or Beacon Centre for the Blind, which is just outside of Birmingham, so that there's an engaged relationship beyond our games. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do. I would say it's in the pipeline more than it's not actually happening. It's just not happening at this moment, because I think people in Birmingham might spontaneously combust if we the more work. Bless them, they're working really hard. I know they are.
But it links very much into the experimentation element of the new vision for volunteering. So test and learn, yeah? If someone listening had been inspired to volunteer or explore more around getting involved with you, or possibly some volunteer managers are really curious to connect with your young volunteer group, Philippa, or your See My Voice project, and kind of do that, where would they go and how would they connect with you?
So we've got a really good website where they can go and find out more about all the projects which we've been speaking about today, but also they can contact us on email or telephone number. I'm going to get the telephone number because I don't know it off by heart. Oh, there they go.
It's only taken me 12 years. 01926 424247.
And our email address is info@britishblindsport.org.uk.
And that's the same for the website, isn't it? Where there's loads of information around britishblindsport.org.uk. Chris, as we round up, we've got this kind of final two from you game, haven't we? I don't know whether you want to throw it out there, but we've got this little game where we say 2 words from you at both being volunteers, but also supporting volunteers. What 2 words would you use to describe what volunteering gives to you or what volunteers give to your sport.
Do you want me to
go on the spot? Go for it. Go for it.
I think as a volunteer, and I continue to volunteer, I find it really rewarding. And I also, that's more than one word, but it's also very
two words, really rewarding. There you go.
It's very sociable. As somebody who works with volunteers, it's about the extended impact. It's not just about the participants, but enabling that person to go away and learn about somebody who's blind or partially sighted, or to feel that they've done some good in society today, or just got off their backside and not been a couch potato and actually done something fun for the day. So impact and rewarding, there's my 2 words.
Thanks, Alaina. And Philippa, that bought you 30 seconds to get your 2 words.
It also meant that I got 2 good words in first, just in case.
I know, Nick's my rewarding. I would say fun, because even though you're volunteering, you're having the fun alongside the people participating in whatever sport is going to be. So it's all about having fun yourself. So fun is definitely one. I'm going to nick your other one. I'm going to say rewarding as well, because it makes you feel good knowing you've helped somebody participate, but it's also rewarding because you're being active. So you're rewarding yourself to kind of fit and healthy and kind of having a good time. So my fun and rewarding are going to merge together. So I'm going to go with that.
It's such an interesting thing, isn't it? Is there anything else quite so universally good as volunteering, where you feel good about it, the people you do it with, they feel good about it? It's it's a very, very, very unique and rare entity. I think that sense that you get from it.
Do you know, there's another thing which when you're a volunteer, you are very responsible. Like when I do collect the money next Saturday for the inflatables, I'll be very responsible for the money and make sure that I do everything right. There's a lovely feeling of walking away and knowing that you didn't have to organise the event, you don't have to do the and maybe because Philippa's nodding there, but maybe it's because we work in sport, we know what goes on all around it, and there is a real sense, I've done my little couple of hours and
I've made a difference, now I'm off.
Definitely. Chris, I don't know whether you've got any more questions, but Alaina, Philippa, it's been absolutely really special kind of listening to everything you're doing in the space of sport and volunteering, and exciting as well with all the things that are coming up and what you've got planned. So a big thank you for coming and talking to us today.
I think we could have gone another hour if we'd not been careful there. There was plenty more to go. Maybe we'll do a part 2 sometime in the future.
Yeah, in the run up to the Ipswich World Games, where we're going to be.
We'd love to do that. That'd be fantastic. Maybe even come down to the games and talk to the volunteers.
We could go to a webinar, webcast, Chris. We could have a go. You could even volunteer. I feel like this is how we could go.
All over
it. Oh my God! I've just signed up our first 2 Ipswich volunteers. How many?
We've got to go through the vetting process. You've got to make sure that we're good enough for you.
Again, thank you to you both for your time. It's really appreciated, and hopefully there's only bigger and better things coming from British blind sport.
Always.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.